Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I would like to welcome you to The Raven's Call. This is a program where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy at the time, sets my mind on fire. Big UPG warning at the beginning of this episode. Like all my episodes, this is my view on heathenry, this is my view on the world. This channel is all about my take on heathenry, my take on the worldview, etc., etc., etc. We go weird and wild places, and it's all within the weird confines of my mind, but you guys seem to like it, so I keep doing it. So just keep in mind, I'm not a hardcore recon, I'm not a neo-pagan fluffy bunny, I'm somewhere in the middle with research and insights, plus new experiences, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Growth, good things. Anyway, if you guys want to contact, you know, all the information is down below. Email, P.O. Box, if you want to mail anything in, the Facebook groups, all that fun stuff, down there. Hit the links. It'll get you there. Promise. So, onwards and upwards. Today's subject. This is a subject that it dawned on me after reading some comments here recently, especially tied to my videos on the Omnis and my videos tied to gods of limited access or gods of limited presence, which is a term that I've heard from you viewers that you prefer, at least some of you prefer, the whole gods of limited presence aspect because it drives home the point a little bit better than gods of limited access, which seems to be like barring access. It's not that, it's just they're in places at times. So anyway, within all of that, and within some of the hearth cult, the regionalization of ideology, philosophy, mythology, it has come to my attention that people don't always take into account the different experiences and the different faces that people can see of the gods. And in particular, the comments that hit me the most over the last couple of years, as far as somebody that has a starkly different experience, starkly different. Between, different heathens in a specific region, you will have some variances of experience in how they see the gods and how they see the goddesses, which is largely why I don't do videos on the specific gods and goddesses. I know a lot of YouTube channels do, but I choose not to go that route because it's hard to do a video like that when everybody has very different experiences of the gods. Your experience of the gods is yours, and you don't need me to tell you about the gods in order for you to experience them, all right? So, there's some minor differences in these, but you're going to have overall a similar aesthetic, a similar experience, because regionally, you all experience mostly the same face of those gods when those gods turn their attention to Midgard, right? For instance, Idun, during the springtime, as Idun brings her life back to the world around us, this is a face that we see of her. We don't necessarily see the face of Idun during the winter times, when things are cold, when things are not renewed in life. We don't necessarily know what she's like during that period of time. And it may simply be that she's always like this, and she's just focusing on a different part of the world at that point. It's a possibility. But the different gods have different faces that we don't see. Thor is a warrior. Thor is also a god of farming. Thor's wife, Sif, the golden hair, is said to be like the fields of grain, the fields of wheat, the golden flowing fields. She is tied very much to agriculture. And so Thor is at once a father, a farmer, and a warrior. Plus, he sits on the council of the gods. So, he has many hats that he wears. He has many experiences, many faces that he shows. And this is... Think about your own personal life and the individuals with whom you deal. Think about yourself, for instance. There is most likely the self that you see at work, or that people see at work, or school, or whatever your outside world is, the mask that you put on when you go out there in the outside world. Yes, they see you basically as you are, but there's certain things you don't let them see down inside. I can tell you right now, the people at work don't know the me at home. Okay? Folks on the YouTube channel don't know the me at my park moot. They don't know the me at work. They don't know the me at home. You see the me of the YouTube channel. Okay? My family knows a different me. They see a different face of me. And it's entirely possible if they saw me in my full boss gear and boss guise at work, that they wouldn't necessarily recognize me as me at that point in time, because my silliness, my glibness isn't necessarily there. My dry wit and humor isn't necessarily there. I'm very serious. I'm very on point, because that's what this requires in that particular instance. It's a focus of a certain aspect of my personality, a certain aspect of my skill set. So, and then the me when I'm drumming is a completely different me, because I tap into an entirely different part of my brain. And so you see these different faces. Yes, they're all me. They're all different aspects of me, but they're different guises, different masks, different parts of me that one would see. The gods are similar because it's not about the scope of the individual. It's not about the scope of the gods. It's about the limitations of our perceptions, because we can only perceive within time and space. Humans are of limited presence. The gods are of limited presence. We can only experience that limited presence. We only experience the time-space within which that interaction occurs. We do not see behind the veil of the mind. We do not see what's going on inside the head. We do not experience what's going on within their hearts. And this is stepping aside from those that have senses that are more tuned to emotions or thoughts and things like that. That's more in the esoteric side of things, but there is some bleed over in there, and you can see those things in different aspects, but you still don't see the fullness of a person. You don't bear their soul down and strip away everything and see the core of them. Only they can experience that, all right? Only they can experience that. Only oneself knows what is in one's mind. I have them all. So, because of this, we can only perceive those things that we see, those things that we experience, and that is true with the gods as well. We experience the gods in the aspects of the gods that we interact with. Okay? Where are you going with this, Eric? What are we doing here? The comments that made this video come to light were some that were made by some of the combat vets that have messaged me on Facebook, YouTube, that I know in person, and that I have had experiences with. Because I haven't served, I haven't been over there in war, and they have. And they will tell me of experiences they have had with the gods that are very different from the experiences that I have had, because they are experiencing the war face of the gods. They are experiencing Odin in his war face, in his leader of the war band role. They've experienced Thor as the warrior, because they have been there. They have seen and experienced things that we in the civilian world may understand from a conceptual level, but we haven't experienced it in the raw, visceral realness, the true experience to truly know it. We haven't had those experiences like they have. They have literally seen a different face of the gods than most of us will ever see. They see the war face in ways that we don't perceive. And so when they come back and they interact, what I hear a lot, again, I'm not a war vet, so I can't speak their minds. Not that any of them have, you can't globalize. Every one of them has a different experience and different insights. And it's amazing to hear some of the insights that they do have, because they have a different perspective than the rest of us. Anyway, when they come back and they interact with civilians who don't see Thor in the same way, who don't see Odin in the same way, it confuses them. At least some of the ones that have expressed to me this particular view. There's a harshness to Odin that they may experience, a gruffness, a coldness that is necessary for war. There is a ferocity of Thor that we will experience in as much as Thor chasing the Jotun with the storms, that we may experience on a microcosmic level within maybe individual fights or things like that. But that is not, that's different. When the hammer is rumbling and striking out there on the field, it is a completely different experience from what I gather. So they will have seen a different face of these gods, and they will come back to people who are experiencing these gods in a completely alien fashion to what they are used to interacting with the gods. Okay? This is a palpable and probably the most visually and conceptually stark example of this whole limited presence aspect. All right? They experience the war gods in ways that we can only conceptualize. And we experience the gods in times of peace. We experience the gods in the whole cosmic order of things, in the maintaining of balance. All of this is the gods. All of this is their purview. The gods are war gods, and they are peace gods. Because they are the gods. And all of this is within their purview. Times of war, times of strife, times of peace and plenty. All of this is within the realm of the gods. They set the world into motion, and then they watch it, and they interact with it. But they still have godly things to do up in Asgard. I say up because that's what we're used to. It's actually more of a transplanar thing. But anyway, the gods experience things in a completely different time frame than we do. We've talked about that, sacred time and sacred space versus profane time, profane space. And so a blink of an eye to them could be an eon to us. You know, the entirety of a war that we experience can be a single thrust of the spear to Odin. So one act of violence by a god, one act of striking out against the Jotun can be experienced as a long-term tumultuous thing to us here in Midgard. This is conceptually something that a lot of people don't necessarily take into account because, again, Western society, I come back to this a lot because we're talking about worldview stuff here at the moment. In the past several videos, we've been talking about worldview stuff. When we're talking about these kind of worldview things, you are there's a shift that occurs with new heathens. Now, experienced heathens get what I'm saying. They understand because they've experienced it in their interactions with others. They know that what one person experiences with Freya and what another person experiences with Freya are probably two different things. The value of Freya to a woman is not going to necessarily be the same value of Freya to a man because we will have different experiences. We have different vantage points of view, and therefore our interactions are going to be different. Our perceptions of those interactions are going to be different, which is the big thing. It's a different in point of perception. And so frame of reference is extremely important. Past experiences, your orlog, colors your interaction with the gods. Your orlog colors your interactions with the mortal realm around you. Why wouldn't it impact your interaction with the gods and your views of the gods, you know? Case in point, a lot of people will tie their particular mythological aesthetic, regionalized aesthetic, to the homeland of an identifiable part of their family because they feel a connection there. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, UK, mainland Europe, all of this, you know, people will tie back to that which they feel a connection to. And it creates a different frame of reference. My frame of reference for the gods is going to be completely different than someone who is coming from an Anglo-Saxon perception of the gods. Okay, not completely different, significantly different. Okay? I know because my dearest friend is an Anglo-Saxon heathen. And we have very differing views on the gods themselves, some of those interactions, but we boil down to some very key points that are very, very similar. And our core heathenry is very, very similar. Our aesthetic trappings are going to be different. Our frames of reference are very much different because we came from different backgrounds. I come from a more academic background. He comes from a more blue-collar background. So we're coming from different standpoints. We have different views on things. We're tied to different gods because of our backgrounds. And so it makes for fascinating conversations. It's incredible. So the combat vets will see and experience the gods differently than civilians. And then when they come home, they have difficulty interacting with civilians for a number of reasons, because largely there's a huge culture shock coming from the warband back into generalized society, because that is what military is, the warband. And the warband has always been other than the generalized society. if you look back at stuff on the Mannerbund or the Vikings or the Herd or any of these war band entities, they are a separate culture from the culture they actually protect, because they have to be effective. It's a whole different thing. There's actually entire belief structures and mythos that are built around the war cult, and that is something that I'm not an expert on, largely because I'm not part of the war cult. I know some individuals who are, and it's interesting to hear their insights in it, but I am not. So if I do a thing on the war cult in the future and some of the mythology and the ideology behind it, I will probably bring a guest in on that one, if I can nail the guy down, because there's one in particular that I would really like to bring to the table and talk about. But anyway, talk with. So, all of this to say, there is a very different experience when they come back to deal with civilians and they're integrated into a society that they have been purposefully detached from. They're experiencing the gods in a different fashion. They're experiencing the world in a different fashion. The culture that they have been enculturated with is very, very different. So their frame of reference is different. Their point of view is different. Their point of perception is different. You're going to have different elements. We talked before about European heathens and North American heathens. There's a difference in points of perception here. There's a difference in where you're coming from. There's a difference in cultural influences around you, because the cultural influences from America are going to be significantly different than the cultural influences of Scandinavia or mainland Europe. When you're dealing with individuals over there, there are cultural ties to the mythology that are non-religious, that are in national identity ties, that cause some rejection of anyone from the outside, almost a xenophobic kind of approach to things. They're going to view the gods differently because they have different trappings around them. They're coming from a different cultural vantage point, and their point of perception is going to be different. Americans are largely, in a lot of ways, disconnected from the homelands of their families, and therefore we're having to recreate a lot of things. We're having to forge reconnections, and we can't just go down and see these points of interest. I can't just walk over and see Thingvellir. Someone in Iceland can. They can go and say, hey, this is where the saga said this happened. It would be like in Texas going to see the Alamo, because it's a major point of orlog for the history of Texas. I can do that here in Texas, but I can't go see Thingvellir. An Icelander can't come and see the Alamo without having to travel. I can't just walk out of my backyard and all of a sudden I'm in Reykjavik. It doesn't work that way. So there is a regional proximal element of things that's an influence on point of vantage, point of view, all of these things. Now, like I said, the thing that brought all of this to light for me, that I needed to do a video on this, was my interaction with some of the war vets, largely because of the disconnect that they were having with some of the civilians and why they can't see the gods the way that they see them. Now, and again, some of the comments were more in a generalized sense, because as warrior cult, they were dealing more with the war gods of the cult, of the Aesir, more of the Odin, Tyr, Thor kind of thing, as opposed to some of the civilians who will branch out more into some of the other gods and goddesses that had less of a focus on war. Keep in mind, all of the gods and goddesses went to war within Ragnarok. So the Aesir and the Aesir Vanir War, I mean, they're no strangers to warfare. It's just there are some that are more identified with it than others. So, yeah, that's a thing. But anyway, because of these questions, because of these things, I thought, you know what? We need to jump into this. We need to talk about the whole gods of limited presence element with relation to differences in perception within heathens. I want to take a second and say, I have absolute mad respect for our warrior cult. I have mad respect for anyone who serves, who has served, who is going to serve, who tried to serve and can't because of some medical issue, but you still got up there and you tried. You tried to go through the door, you tried to go out there, but because of some medical issue that wasn't your fault, you couldn't get in. I mean, props that you tried. Mad props to those people that are over there taking fire, that are keeping the vehicles running, that keep the combat individuals out there in the field, the ones that are running supplies, the ones that are running logistics, all of you. Thank you so much. Mad respect. Cannot express it enough. Part of the reason I wanted to do this video was out of respect for you guys, so that people would stop and think, they actually experienced the world differently than I have experienced it. Because that's the thing. As a civilian, I have been guilty of this. Interacting with war vets and not necessarily recognizing the fact, because they're back here, they're in my setting. They're experiencing my setting. I haven't experienced their setting. And sometimes I forget about that when I'm dealing with them on a theological or a spiritual level, that they have experienced a completely different side of things than what I have. And so my insight doesn't necessarily translate. I can't necessarily put things into those words without some mental gymnastics. I can, after fashion, from a deep understanding and years and years and years of experience with the gods and theological side of things, but none of that will ever give me the experience that they have had in war and in combat, in any of these situations that we have found ourselves in for any number of political reasons, whatever, over the years. Political reasonings aside, these individuals went to war, went to combat, and thank you. But because of that, I won't be able to give a first-hand experience of Thor in war. I can give a conceptual idea of Thor in war, but I can't give an experienced hand at it. So that's why, if you've got individuals who are in your tribes who have been over there, who have served, understand they're going to see the world differently than you do. And you need to take that into account. I'm not saying, be respectful of it. Listen to them. Listen to them. Because they have experiences you cannot have. You have experiences and points of view they cannot have. So together, you can help round each other out. Okay? It takes two to tango here. You have experiences with the gods and goddesses from a world of peace that they may have had some of before, but their experiences over there will have changed that for them. And they will have experiences over there that you have no concept of, other than what you've seen in movies, TV, video games, which they've experienced it firsthand. They were there. Okay? It's a completely different ballpark. Okay? Completely different thing. So, learn from them, they will learn from you, and together you can be strong, because a society requires leadership roles, priest class roles, working class roles, warrior cult. It is an essential part of a society for the survival of the society, for the thriving of the society. It's a very real aspect that needs to be recognized, respected, and kept alive, because those are the individuals that fight so that you can still do what you do here. And if things ever got real, they're the individuals that would instantaneously step up and defend the tribe, because they've been trained to do it, they've experienced it, and where you may freeze because you've never been in a live firefight, they're into pure reaction at that point. PTSD aside. Yeah, there's the PTSD thing shifts things for them as far as reaction goes, but that's a whole different thing, the realm of psychology, and that's my wheelhouse. You know how it is. So anyway, that's the essence of this video, guys. That's what I wanted to drive home in all of this, is that we experience the gods differently. Okay? You're going to experience the gods differently from regional points of view. You're going to experience the gods differently from the experiences that have been recorded in your orlog. You're going to experience them differently just because you are you and no one else is. So your perceptions, your understandings, what you take away from your interactions with the gods. I mean, two people can watch the same movie and take away completely different messages from it. I know my lady and I do it all the time. She will focus on things in the movie and be like, you're missing the point. And I'll look at some other deep subtext and whatnot and go, no, you're missing the point. And we're both right. But we can only see our view, because that's our perception. That's where we are. Perception is a huge thing. So, take perception into account. Take points of perception into account as you build your tribes, as you work on your hearth cult. Your hearth cult is built on the experiences that the point of perception of your hearth as it experiences the outside world, as it experiences the gods and goddesses, the ancestors, the Vatsir. Your hearth cult needs to reflect the perceptions of your hearth. Okay? That is the perceptions of everybody that's within that hearth, all kind of rolled into one, because that is the culture of that hearth. It will take on its own life, its own thing. Embrace that. Embrace that. That is the flavor of heathenry. That is the spice that makes this soup nice and tasty. So, embrace these different points of perception. Learn from each other and listen. Do not, word of warning, if you are a leader within a tribe, do not try to force a perception of the world or the gods onto your people. Yes, you're going to have an established tribal philosophy, an established tribal mythos, an established tribal worldview, which is kind of an amalgamation of all of that into one. Okay? Not to say that you have to crib and syncretize every little element that each of the hearths brings to it. You'll never get anywhere with that. It's more of a general gestalt of the world and the gods from the tribal point of view. And it is mostly going to take on the trappings and aesthetics of the leadership, but it will be influenced by and respectful of the views of all of those within, or else it's not going to be representative of those within the tribe, and they won't stick with it. They'll leave. They need to feel a part of it, represented, welcomed, listened to, acknowledged, seen. Okay? Think of things from their point of perception. So, all right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up on this one. I don't think this one was quite as wandery and meandery, but it was. We went a little here and there because what started off as a simple question about how war vets experience the gods differently than those civilians who've never seen war grew into, well, yeah, but there's a whole lot more that influences perception. That's just a very, very good example of it. Very, very good example of it. And one that we need to take into account. And all these other points of perception need to be taken into account as well. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope that this was helpful for those building tribes, for those in existing tribes that maybe needed to be reminded about this, or that have never really thought about it in those terms, or that already knew about it and already think about it, but are grateful that somebody's saying it on a public scale out there to a couple thousand viewers. We're not at 2,000 yet, but we're close. So anyway, I hope you guys liked it. I hope you enjoy it. Please give me feedback and everything below. Contact me, emails, all that fun stuff. And I listen. I read. I may not always get to reply, but I read. I read every comment that goes on YouTube. I read every email that comes into me. I read every message that's sent to me. Every post on the groups. Every post on the Facebook page. I read it all. I don't always get to reply because, like I said, things are stupid busy right now. But I do read them, which is why I like on the comments. I like to hit the heart to let you know that I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm reading it. I'm reading it. So every one of them that gets up there, I read. Okay? So do not hesitate to throw it up there. Do not hesitate to interact with each other on there. Don't feel like you got to wait for me to interact with one of the comments before you jump in there. Talk to each other. Communicate. Network. All right? And I tell you what I need to tell you in the videos, talk to each other too, right? Especially in the Facebook group. Talk to each other. Engage. Have conversations. That's what it's there for. Network, people. Network. That's what it's there for. All right, I'm going to get off here before I ramble anymore. Hail to you all. Thank you. May your hearth fires burn bright. All right. Keep from brushing up against the microphone. Makes for weird noises. We're going to try for another one. See if my voice holds out. I was getting kind of raspy in that last video. I've been up for way too long. I'm working stupid hours these days and I'm kind of tired. It's all right. Anyway, I have to fit in the videos where I can. And at this point, it's after a long shift. So, after my videos here, I may be going to bed before long. because I got to work some weird hours tonight too. So, trying to get my camera set up right, because it's kind of difficult when you're working with a phone and a janky little tripod sitting on the back of your truck in your front yard. It's a crazy thing. All right, so we're going to try this one. This is one that came from another YouTube comment. Dang it. Nah, it's all right. I don't have to do a specific one on this one. So anyway, because it's multiple comments that have led to this, and I think it's important that we touch on it. So we'll get there in a second. Of course, by the time you're watching this, you've already seen it. Magic. All right, pitter patter, let's get at it. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.